Oh. I'm not getting any volume on the Teams meeting.
So I'll just get everyone to introduce you. Oh, okay. Whatever. Okay, thank you.
You all ready there, kid?
Okay, welcome everybody. Folks don't know me, I'm Jeff Saber, I'm the mayor of West Township. And I want to welcome everybody to tonight's, this is the second session we've had on building tiny homes and additional residential units. First one we had Prescott, we had a full house there. So it was a good crowd tonight. I think there was something like 40 some people that signed up. We also have 6 people or 7 people online too. So they'll, they may be asking questions throughout also. But I'll turn you over to the staff now, and there's a great bit of knowledge at this table, so make sure you ask your questions. And be respectful of others, that's all I ask. Thank you very much, and welcome.
Hi everyone, I'm Caroline Ragudo. I work for the Iowa Counties of Leeds and Grenville, and I'm the affordable housing coordinator. So thank you all for coming to hear about the tiny homes and additional residential units. I'll have all the staff introduce themselves. Just first off, can you call a little louder? We do have a microphone, so maybe we'll use that. That helpful.
There's some 6 seats right up front too.
That's okay. Shy. Okay.
Hello, is that good? Better for everyone? Yes? Okay, perfect. My name is Melissa Banford. I'm the planner at Augusta. I am Wendy Van, I'm the community development coordinator with the township of Edwardsburg Cardinal.
I'm Dwayne Crawford. I'm the chief building official for the township of Edwardsburg Cardinal.
And I'm Sean Nerman. I'm the manager of building and bylaw and the chief building official for the town of Prescott.
Just wanted to let everybody know that tonight's presentation is being recorded and will be posted online later. We do ask that you hold all questions till the end of the slideshow presentation, just because we might be covering information in the next slide that you have a question about. It just helps with the flow of the presentation. And we'll start with, I think, with Wendy Van Cooper. I'm going to talk a little bit about what is an additional residential unit and a little bit about what is a tiny home. And then I'm going to show my more severe to talk about zoning bylaws and what to do if your plan doesn't conform to the zoning bylaws. So what is an additional residential unit? We also call it business unit. There should it be.
Oh, yes, sorry. If you'd like to forward the slides to.
Right, so we'll talk about what is an additional residential unit. We also call these secondary suites or additional dwelling units or garden suites or in-law suites. In Edwardsburg, Carter, we call these second dwellings or second dwelling units. It's a self-contained unit, with a private kitchen, bathroom, and a sleeping area. It's also a separate dwelling created either within your home or in another building on your property that may be rented out to others. Some people build them to keep a family member close by, but maybe not in the same house, or but it doesn't have to be a family member. It could be anyone that you're renting it out to. So we've got some examples that you are not able to see yet, but I can talk a little bit about what an additional unit is. So this could be a unit that is within your main dwelling house. It's still secondary to the principal dwelling on your property, but it could be an addition that you've built to your house, or it could be like a basement apartment or an upper, like a third-story apartment. It doesn't have to be within your principal dwelling. It could be as a separate building on your property. So if you've got an accessory building already on your property, a really large shed or a garage that you want to convert to an additional residential unit, you could do that. Or you could just build an entirely new additional residential unit. So a new building or a new structure, be that ARU. And that's where I'm going to talk a little bit about tiny homes also. Maybe go ahead, 2 more. That's all right. Oh, I don't want to say that. So the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing does have a guide if you're looking to build an additional residential unit, and their guide is online at ontario.ca. Do you have copies of that?
You know, it's like 20 or 30 pages long.
Oh, okay. So it's online, ontario.ca /add second unit to your house. And it's a guide that's meant, it's meant if you're building within your principal dwelling, but if you're planning for a detached structure, most of the items in that guide are still going to apply. So it's just a helpful place to go and find some more information, but you've also got good resources here within the municipality. So what is a tiny home? So a tiny home is a small, private, and self-contained dwelling unit. It has living and dining areas with kitchen, bathroom facilities, sleep area, and it's intended for year-round use. So a trailer or recreational vehicle is not considered a tiny home because they're not typically built for year-round use. They are, you could build tiny homes in Fairville, but it still needs to meet the provision of the local zoning bylaw and of course the Ontario Building Code. So next slide. So your local zoning bylaw, it might have a minimum size or minimum floor area for a dwelling, and this would apply to a tiny home. But even if the zoning bylaw doesn't have the minimum size, it's going to be the building code. So the smallest it could be is 17.5 meters squared or 180 feet. There's also a guide online from MMH about building or buying a tiny home, and this guide is meant to apply to a new structure that's being built, not the conversion of an existing building. But as I mentioned before, like a lot of the provisions that there would still apply, so it's still good information. I'm going to move to more first to talk about the zoning bylaw. Sure.
Yes,
That's okay.
Okay, so in terms of obtaining building permits and zoning compliance for tiny homes and additional residential units, the starting point is to reach out to your municipality. You get to know some faces here tonight from Augusta, Edwardsburg, Cardinal, and Prescott. The rules do vary between municipalities, and we're there to answer your questions specifically about your property and our specific rules, but we'll give some general information tonight, kind of overall, and then we can talk about more specifics with you either here or at a later time. So the regulations for tiny homes and additional residential units does come from the zoning bylaw, which we each do have 3 separate zoning bylaws. And there might be special requirements that differ between municipalities based on whether there's servicing. So an example of Augusta, we don't currently have any municipal servicing, sewage and water. Prescott obviously has sewage and water, and I believe portions of Westwood Cardinal may have sewer and water, and then the rest is rural, all on private and septic services. So again, the starting point is to reach out to the planning people, which is myself, Melissa, Wendy at Westwood Cardinal, or Sean, who kind of wears both hats at Prescott. So in terms of the zoning requirements, these are kind of the general rules. It looks at certain things like the maximum number of units that you're permitted on a property. Generally in the rural areas, you're permitted your main dwelling house, but then you're also permitted an additional dwelling unit, whether it's detached or attached to your house. Where there's servicing, there's potential for another unit. And Sean and Wendy can certainly speak to that. Augusta, because we're just on rural services, it's just one additional residential unit per lot. The other things that the zoning will deal with is such things as location. Sometimes the zoning bylaw will prescribe the distance it needs to be from the house, the main house, sometimes it doesn't. It often speaks to the minimum size it has to be or the maximum size it has to be. Typically, a second dwelling is a secondary use, it's an accessory use to the main house, so it typically has to be smaller. So again, in the example of Augusta, it's 45% of the main dwelling house, if it has a second dwelling. And I believe Edwardsburg Cardinal might be 50%, yeah. And Prescott, I'm not sure, it's 50.
Well, it's 40, but because you're allowed more than one, no accessory unit can exceed 40%.
Okay, so yeah, Sean can certainly speak to that, but other things are setback requirements, which are the distance it needs to be from property lines and the road. Parking requirements, how many parking spaces you're required to provide for the second dwelling. And the location of an entrance, whether it can be a shared entrance or whether it can be a separate entrance will vary by municipality. And again, servicing, whether it's private services or septic. And as well as outdoor amenity space. Some municipality or municipal bylaws do have requirements for shared outdoor space and some don't speak to it at all. So if your project, your additional residential unit, or if you're proposing a tiny home on a property, doesn't conform to the specifics of each of our zoning bylaws, there is provision to seek relief. The type of application you make depends on the extent of relief that you need. So if it's something that's very minor, so in the case of say second dwelling, where our maximum, again, Augusta, just because I know it well, is 45%. Say you want to be 55% of the main dwelling. That's a fairly modest increase. So it might be able to be addressed to a minor variance application, which is a planning process. If it's something more extensive, or you're introducing a new use to the property, then you would go through a rezoning process, which is a little bit more extensive. But there is some options. If you can't quite meet what our rules say, there are some ability to make some variations to those. And again, staff can speak to you specifically and help you through the process. And then again, the zoning bylaws will also probably tell you where you can't have these structures. Places that we typically can't are floodplain. Obviously, we don't want anyone building in your floodplain, nor does your insurance company. And so there'd be wetlands, that kind of thing. And there might be some specifics where you can't have it where there's a daycare or a boarding house, that kind of thing. So again, it does vary between municipalities.
There we go. Okay, so the big thing to do to remember with all of these things is they always require a building permit. Even if you think that the work's already been all completed, it should be really, really simple to divide the house and stuff like that. It does not change the fact that you still need a building permit because we're taking it from one dwelling use to multiple dwelling uses. Okay, within the same property. So that means that we're going to require drawings. Drawings can be done by the homeowner, providing there is not more than 2 units in total being constructed. If it's more than 2 units, technically it takes you outside of what is normally defined as a house, and you have to have professionally drawn things. Now, I can speak for Prescott and Augusta, and Dwight Drain will confirm it. We've got lots of stuff that we can hand you to give you an idea of what the plans would need to look like, so that you guys can decide whether or not you're capable of drawing the plans that will be needed. And remember, each home will have at minimum 2 inspections, but don't be surprised if it's 5, 6, 7, or 8, depending on exactly what you need to do. So, if you're bringing in a factory-built home, like Gilcrest, Seahawk, Cabinscape, like they're in Maori Town anyways. All of them are built to certain standards, and that whoever's building it for you has to have that standard. Or they have to have the inspector where it was built inspected first to do all the work that's done ahead of time. Then when they bring it to Prescott or wherever it's going, that building department again issues another building permit for the hookup of the services and the foundations and the electricity, and they re-inspect too. So it's important to understand that wherever you're thinking about getting it, to reach out to your local municipality and just simply double check that this is someone that's done it before, they're aware of all the things that need to be done, and we go from there.
I just asked, it's factory built homes. There are companies that are outside the province. And those homes would have to be complied with Ontario Building Code. So it's important that when you do come into the municipality to get a permit, that the drawing that you bring with you are certified by a professional from Ontario who will carry a building code identification number listed for Ontario.
So, and one of the other big things that people, when they come in, asking to add an additional unit, some of the things that it doesn't stop it, but it's something that you want to think about, is some of the costs that are involved in relation to creating it. So in the town of Prescott, one of the biggest problems is what's the water service line that's servicing your house? Because when you add another apartment and kitchen and bathroom usually and everything else, we have to do the sizing to make sure that there's adequate water service there for you and the tenant that's putting it in, so that basically both of you get the enjoyment. So sometimes you have to increase the size of the water service. That can scare people, because it's not the cheapest thing to do when you have to run a bigger line that's running through it. Now, in the country, you have to deal with the septic.
Septic systems and wells. And the same goes with basically your well capacity will definitely change, and it's worthwhile having that tested to ensure that you have sufficient well capacity to service the second unit. Also, with septic systems, the septic system that you have currently for the single residence has been designed for the use of the single residence. When you add next upstairs and bedrooms, you're increasing the hydraulic load of the septic system. That will require a review by the area's conservation authority, at least,
So thank you.
South Asian Conservation Authority. So it would be worthwhile before you contact them and see if they have the permit for the septic system in your backyard. They'll have all the information that is current, which will really help whoever is going to do the review for the additional capacity for that system.
Yeah, so at minimum though, all accessory units have to have a hot and cold water supply, a sink, a bathtub or shower, a toilet and a kitchen sink. They must also have access to laundry facilities, and that's not to say they can't share them with you. But at the same point, people sometimes go, well, because that's one of the things that really kick up the water usage is laundry facilities. They'll go, well, can't they go to a laundromat? Technically, no. Building code says you have to have an on-site toilet. Okay, now it could be that it's a shared services within the main house or whatever the case may be, and then that way you still only have one set of laundry services. But it is something that people need to think about. You also want to make sure that you have a separate shut-off valve so that you can both work on their service if you need to or your own. And a qualified plumber must do the work because it is going to be a place that's being rented out.
Another thing that you take into consideration too, particularly if it's a standalone unit in a rural area, you can forego the septic system that you have on your property and install a compost pump. They're permitted in the building code as an option to having to put in plumbing for the new unit. But the kicker is your gray water has to go to a gray water pit, which requires a permit.
One of the other big things to think about also, because often when people are doing this, it's a house that they're converting into like 2 units basically, right? You have to consider how that house unit is going to be heated. One of the things that happens is if you're sharing a furnace, okay, like a hot air furnace, either propane, oil, doesn't matter. But if you're sharing that furnace, you will have to install what's called an HVAC smoke detector. And this is a system that actually detects smoke in the furnace plenum and shuts it down so that you don't pump smoke into your neighbor or the neighbor pumps it into you. But again, it's one of those things that add cost to it that people don't sometimes realize how much it will be. It's important you reach out to an HVAC guy to understand that. That, or you have to put in a totally separate system for the unit that you're placing in there. And sometimes that's the choice for people too, that they sometimes, they're doing it in the garage or whatnot. So they're going to have a totally separate system just for inside that area that's got nothing to do with the house, but it's something that you do want to think about before you just, go ahead with it.
Another thing you may want to take into consideration, particularly if you're sharing a water service with, let's say, 2 residential or 3 residential units, you may want to consider metering each one, either separately on meters that you own personally or bringing in the extra services, because what can happen, and I have experienced it, where you have 3 people using the same service, they split the water bill, and you have one of them that has an extensively large family that doesn't want laundry every night. So who's paying for the laundry?
The other thing you may want to consider too is who's going to choose the ARU, okay, or the accessory unit. This really is important because you have to understand, we issue permits based on the building code, but once it's built and done, I in Prescott, and you got someone separate, but I in Prescott then end up getting called out with my bylaw hat on because they're calling to complain about the fact that there's too much noise transfer. Odors are moving between the 2 houses. Big ones and noise. So technically, under the building code, you do not have to worry about the sound transfer qualification. But if it's under the property standards, and so if you're renting it to someone, they have the right to call the township to say they have a problem with where they're renting. So if you didn't take that into account, the first thing I do as the bylaw officer is come in and say, I'm terribly sorry. I warned you before you built it. But now, because we've had a complaint, you're going to have to put in all the noise retention stuff because it's a complaint under the property standards. How to say this nicely? I always ask people the same question. If this is someone that you're going to rent to that you can beat to keep them quiet, go ahead. You don't have to worry about the sound transfer because it's an in-law, it's a kid, it's a cousin, it's someone that you know personally that you can probably not have a complaint come through the property standards. But if you're doing this so that you can rent to a total stranger, I would really stress to you that you might want to build it to the property standards requirements as well at the same time, so that you're not ripping down the drywall that was a fire separation to put in resilient channel and soundproofing insulation because you got an order under property standard.
That's the advice that we give also, and I would think that anybody in the tutoring position would be doing the same thing with any type of accessory dwelling being built in the house of itself. That includes basement, and actually basements are probably worse because you've got that floor above you, and all you gotta do is have one person with a heavy foot,
It really
and
carries the sound
it
through.
carries really, yeah.
Not a problem. Also, don't forget that you have to have a light switch in every room. And you have to have a switch, like a three-way switch at the top and bottom of stairs. And, electrical permits are separate from the building permit. So you'll actually have to reach out to, the Electrical Safety Authority, which is, I'm gonna mess up the first three digits, but it's either 1888 or 866, and then it's ESAC. To reach them, you can find them, Google them. Our inspectors around every Monday and Wednesday, I believe, so, in this area. Okay, and the last one that we left here is fire separation. So fire separation is required. It's not a minimum. It's, well, excuse me, it is a minimum, but it's not like we can just exclude it, no matter who's living in the apartment below you or above you, or whatever the case may be. And this is where I mentioned that you may want to do the soundproofing. A fire separation can be in a floor, a wall, a door, a self-closing device. All that's part of your fire separation. So to give you an idea, say you have a house that you both come in the same door, and then one goes to the right and one goes to the left. Okay, the door coming into the house doesn't need to be fireproofed, but that two doors off the common area do have to be a minimum of a 20-minute door. Okay, because it's a common area. So that basically, once you have a common area, it's separating from the thing. Now, if they both came in separate from outside, like totally different, then that's just a regular door that comes in. But that's what I mean. We have to see each individual project at the time to determine exactly what we need, because there's so many different combinations and each one affects it slightly different. So many times when you hear someone saying, oh, that building official over here doesn't make me do it, it's not because it's that building official is different, but your project in this situation is just slightly different than what it was before. And people don't always recognize what the differences were. They just know, well, I had to put in a fire separator, you know, a fire rated door in this township, and I didn't hear. But again, slight differences in the project make a slight difference in how it has to be constructed.
One piece of advice I can also give you that if it's an older home, something that's older than 5 years, you have areas within the Part 11 of the building code. And most of you will be familiar with that, but a designer would be. And there's actually areas in there that can offer some types of alternative measures that would help you with the fire separation, the noise attenuation.
Fire separation.
You're right.
Yeah.
But
Everything else.
but it's important that you, in those situations, that you should actually get the advice
From a designer.
from a designer.
Yeah, those Part 11 exemptions are for a lot of different things. There's two things though it will not address. One is fire separation and life safety. Second one is plumbing. Don't ask me why plumbing's so special. Okay, there's some relief on insulation, there's some relief on the HVAC unit, there's some relief on a lot of things. But for whatever reason, plumbing must be brought up to code when you're submitting it. And the same thing with the fire separations, because it's a life safety issue. We did, so. Yeah, so again, these are the different options you got, and that's what I meant by how every program is, or each project is slightly different. Option A, a door leading directly to the exterior, is one of the best and easiest ways to have an ARU, because it takes a lot of the things that you would have to do out, because it's almost like you're two separate units. And if you can really do a vertical fire separation along the thing, so you got side A and side B, both with their own entrances, is the easiest to construct in terms of construction and overall cost. So option B was that thing that I was mentioning before about the shared egress, where you basically come out of your apartment, share a common area, and then exit the building. Some of the things that kick in there is, like I said, self-closures on the door, fire rated door to the actual unit. And then depending on what it's like, you may need emergency lighting to make sure people can see the way to get out through that common area. And then option C is one that we see even less, because as much as people don't like sharing their house, like separating off apart to rent out, they like sharing their actual house even less. But it is possible where you can have an egress that goes through someone else's house to get outside. It is possible. It just doesn't happen very often. So, and these are all our contacts information.
Thanks, everybody. Really appreciate that. I feel like I learn something new every time. So I'd like to take the opportunity to talk to you about a couple of different funding programs that we offer through the county. I do refer them as secondary suites throughout, but it's the same thing. The terms interchangeable with the ARU. So the two different programs that we do offer at the counties is the Ontario Priorities Housing Initiative Secondary Suite Program, which is geared towards homeowners. It is funded by the province. And then we have another program called the Landlord Secondary Suite Program, which is geared towards small landlords and is funded through the counties. So the purpose of these programs is intended to increase the supply of affordable rental housing in Leeds and Grenville for low-income households. This is done through the creation of ARUs that are rented at below market rents. So funding for these programs is provided in the form of a forgivable loan. So a forgivable loan is a loan in which the entire amount or a portion can be forgiven or deferred for a period of time by the lender when the terms and conditions are met. So under the OFI homeowner program, funding is forgiven at an equal rate per year over 15 years. So let's say you sign up for the program and you receive the funding for it and you meet all the terms and conditions of the program. After 15 years, the complete loan amount is forgiven and you don't have to pay anything back. Because it's forgiven at an equal rate per year, let's say you did receive the funding and maybe you built the secondary unit for, let's say, a family member, and then they moved out after a few years. And if you didn't want to re-rent it to a stranger or somebody else, you could exit the program early. You just had to pay back the portion that was remaining from your loan amount. So some of it would be forgiven and then the equal amount would be forgiven per year. The landlord program is a little bit different in that there's a requirement for the loan to be, it's for a full 10 years is the commitment for this program. So it's forgiven after 10 years completion of the program. So I'll talk to you, both the programs are very similar, but I'll just highlight the main differences for each one initially. So starting with our homeowner program, it is geared towards applicants or homeowners who are constructing a unit that are low to moderate income. So with having a household income that doesn't exceed $97,000. So we're really gearing this program to homeowners who need a little bit of extra help in order to construct the unit, and those that are looking to make their mortgage more affordable. Units constructed under this program must be located on the property of the primary residence. So that could be either located within the home, so like in their basement, or it could actually be a garden suite, just as long as it's located on the property. And the maximum funding for this program is up to 1 unit for $25,000 to go towards the cost. So the other program that we offer is geared towards small landlords in Leeds and Grenville to create a unit on the property of an existing residential unit. So it could be to add a unit to a single family home and turn it into a duplex. And we are gearing it to small landlords. So that means that they would have between 1 and 10 residential rental units. And the maximum project funding for this is up to $50,000. So for the rest of my slides, all the program criteria is the same for both of the programs. So in order to receive this assistance, it is to create, it's funding that has to be to create a new secondary suite that's located within Leeds and Grenville. And it can't be for a renovation of an existing suite. It must be modest in the floor space and amenities. And when you're looking at applying for the program, we're looking at projects that are ready to go. So you would have already talked to all of these lovely people ahead of time and worked out your project, got your permits, have your plans in place, and you're ready to go, and you're just looking for a little bit of extra money to help make it happen, and have your quote ready. So costs that are eligible under this program are directly related to creating a unit. So plumbing, electrical, framing, drywall, doors and windows, kitchens, soft costs such as your permits, taxes, and inspection fees. But if you are doing the labor yourself, it's not an eligible cost. Once your project is approved, the loans are secured on title for the duration of the loan forgiveness period, and you would sign a promissory note agreement with the counties. We are looking at the construction to proceed quickly, so within 120 days, and to be done within 24 months. And the county does confirm annually that the rents are at an affordable rate, which I'll cover in another slide, and that your mortgage and taxes are paid up to date. Funding in these programs are paid over construction milestones. So once you receive your plumbing pass, that would be the first trigger for a payment of about 25%. Then electrical, building, and then at the final inspection occupancy, that's when you receive the fourth payment. And one thing I really wanted to highlight in this is that the homeowner or landlord does choose the tenant who moves into their unit. So you would choose who would be moving into this unit. However, the tenant does need to meet eligibility criteria for community housing because it is an affordable unit geared towards a low-income household. So once you do locate a tenant that you'd like to move in, you would refer them to the social housing registry who would confirm that they're eligible for social housing. So their income does need to be below $89,000. Their assets need to be below 50. Some exclusions apply. So locked-in pensions, locked-in investments, things like that don't count. And there's some other criteria. The social housing department would confirm whether they're eligible or not. They would let you know and the tenant know. I do want to mention that it can absolutely be a relative of the homeowner or the landlord. We do expect a lot of the secondary suites could be constructed, for instance, for an adult child or an elderly relative that would be moving into the unit. And let's say you're just constructing this in order to make your mortgage more affordable. If you do need help finding a tenant, we absolutely can provide assistance with that. We have lots of social housing wait lists with people who are waiting for a unit, and we could send you the names and you can choose from the list of who you would like to have as a tenant. And again, as the purpose of the program is to create new affordable units, the maximum rents that can be charged during the loan forgiveness period are 80% of the average market rent in leasing rentals. So we do a rent survey every year and update them. So for this year, for instance, a one-bedroom apartment is $990 would be the maximum rent that can be charged, or $1157 for a two-bedroom apartment. Application forms. So we actually printed some off and brought some tonight, and we also have applications available online for both of the programs, as well as fact sheets. And for any tenants that are looking to move into one of your units, all of our social housing applications are also available online or in any of our community and social services offices. And on the application is the contact information for the social housing registry. And I would encourage anyone who's thinking about applying for the program to contact our office early on. And you can talk to our staff about your project and see how it might fit with the program. And then they can walk you through the application process and support you along the way. And then that's my contact information. So again, I'm the Affordable Housing Coordinator of the county. And then now it's time for questions. So, if you do have a question, I guess we'll have you raise your hand and then maybe you can just yell it out once we point to you. I guess that's probably the easiest way. Yes, Sandra?
I have a unique situation with 4 stone units on Water Street in Prescott. They're about 1,600 square feet each. And all of a sudden thinking in terms of how could they be, let's say somebody buys one and decides that they want to make it into two smaller rental units. And it is a heritage building on the outside, so it's stone. And then my second question, you know what it's gonna be, I wanna make sure that people know and understand about mass timber and the opportunity that, there is to, create a building or a tiny, small home, using mass timber, because it's becoming a very preferred building, material right across, well, in Canada, but definitely throughout Europe and the US. And we're trying to get a factory to create mass timber located in Eastern Ontario. So I'd like to put in a little pitch for that.
Okay, so it sounds like you might have a question. Would it be for Sean?
It was for Sean.
Okay.
Yeah, every single one of those properties, you're currently zoned in that area CW, so residential use is allowed. And we just simply have to have a set of plans and we'd have to go from there. So
Well, mine has all been rezoned. It's all residential as well.
that's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
So it's
yeah.
CW, so it's that residential use is very much allowed, so.
Yeah.
The only thing you would have in all honesty is the same problem that a couple other apartments have had in that area, which is limited parking.
Okay.
But at the same point, a minor variance can usually address that. The town has several. One, there's two things. Less people need parking all the time, so as long as we're looking to that type of people, that helps a lot. Second thing is a reminder to anyone that does rent from you and they need to get a place from the town, how far they'll have to walk to find an adequate place to park.
And my hope would be that I'd be able to sell it to somebody.
And let them do it, and that's fine. And that's fine.
Can the loan be transferred?
The homeowner or the landlord loan? If you're building something.
Either, I guess,
So are you thinking about building on the property of your own home? or-
if someone were to build, go through the approval and 5 years down the road, decide to sell. The new owner, would like to keep the same tenants, assume the same contract. Are they able to take on the renewal of that loan, or does that?
Oh, I understand.
Yeah.
So, I can answer it for both questions. Under the OP homeowner program, unfortunately, if you transfer ownership of this property, it's no longer going to be your primary residence, and that's a provincial criteria that we're tied into. So you would, again, it's forgiven at an equal rate for years, so you would then have to repay the amount owing. The tenant would have rights as a tenant. They would, when you'd be selling the home, you'd be selling it if there was an existing tenant that was living in it, and there's all those rules around that. There is something written into our landlord program that does allow for the ability to transfer. Let's say if it's the person buying the unit wishes to take on the agreement and continue it for the remainder, there is an ability for the landlord program to do that. Do we have any questions? We have some people joining us online. I meant to check with Leslie to see if they had any. I'll try to split between the two.
Just see if I can summarize this for you.
Yes.
Can I confirm whether the information shared is specific to ARUs or if it applies to tiny homes as well? If it's the former, could you provide more information about the regulation and policies related to building a tiny home in the aforementioned municipalities? I'm not sure if that's coming up on your screen there too.
Is it funding or it's, if it's related to funding, so what I can say is the secondary suite programs, garden suite could be a tiny home, so it would apply equally. I would even venture a building and planning question with that. I'll pass that over to you guys.
So I don't know if they're talking about ARUs can be tiny homes, maybe that's what they're talking about. So, so if you have a main dwelling on a private house, so you have a main dwelling of your property and you want to do an additional residential unit, you can have a tiny home. It doesn't have to be very big. It just needs to be building code requirements, which are maybe as little as 200 square feet. So a tiny home is an option for you as an additional residential unit. Or you could have a tiny home on a vacant lot, just by itself, as a principal dwelling. So there's options for tiny homes, you just need to meet building code requirements, so it could be a tiny home on a vacant lot as your main home, or it could be your additional residential unit on a lot where you have a bigger house.
Let's see, I'll do the question at the back and then you next, okay?
Sort of a spin off the gentleman's question. If I add a tiny or auxiliary residence to my current primary residence, and they in 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 years, I build a new residence for me to move to, no longer my primary, would that loan be, let's say, this is a rental unit for the 2 halves now, would that that loan need to be off that time?
So the OP funding really is tied, it's very specific that it has to be your primary residence for the duration of the loan period. So at that point, you would then probably just have to make the decision whether you wanted to just repay the portion back that's remaining, or keep living there if it's a couple more years or whatever you just choose to decide. But it is very specific. I don't know why they wrote that in the requirements, but it is something that's in there for sure.
No, just me. But when you're going to build it, you could apply as a small landlord, even if you're going to live in one of the units. Could they not? Because it's less than 10 units.
Right, that's very creative.
So I'm just saying. If you think it may happen, you take it out. Now, don't get me wrong, each one's slightly different, but there would still be some help from you and you would still have the flexibility to move if you wanted to in the future. Just remember with the landlord one, you must fulfill the 10 years for it to become forgivable. So it means even if you're not living there, you're still stuck.
And you can't live in a funded unit, so you have to.
It would only work, yeah.
Yeah, good job, Sean. I wouldn't find that. Great. And yourself?
And with the tiny home and with the other, the problem I had, you're only allowed to have so much outbuilding roof coverage on your lot geared to the amount of what your house carries. I don't quite understand how this works, but maybe Mr. Mayor will explain.
So in Prescott, the maximum accessory structures you can have is up to 3 of them. And the total combined roof coverage cannot exceed, I'm gonna say it's 645 square feet, but
That's the total lot.
that's the total of the accessory structures and 3. So there's 2 combinations. You can't have more than 3 structures. And you can't have those 3 structures equal more than 645. But if you wanted to tear out all your accessory structures and build one tiny house that was 645, you could do that.
No, I'm adding on to my place. So I'm bringing my place up into a multi, so like do the landlord thing where, what I was hoping for
Yep.
was have a main floor, a loft, the second one, the main floor and the loft, and the back one, main floor and the loft.
Again, if it's all in the same building,
Same structure, yes.
you can have up to 3 without needing planning approval.
Okay,
If you go beyond 3, you would need planning approval to switch the zoning of your property to make it multi-residential.
now if you take the 2 multi-residential, if I go 2 multi-residential or 3, then what happens if they're just, can you say it's not multi-residential, it is, you build
Once we go beyond 3
Wait, so-
on one lot, it becomes multi-residential and it
Okay,
needs
so-
rezone.
But if it's in the same building, you can have more than one kitchen, you can have another kitchen. we have
Again,
more than
up to
one-
3.
Up to 3, that's it. You can,
That's
you
it.
can't have any more than that.
That's correct.
Okay, first of the decide.
The minimum square footage of a tiny home is 188 square feet, I think it was. What's the maximum?
400 we use.
After 400, it becomes a small home, but it doesn't really mean anything. It's just how you refer to it. Okay, tiny homes are specific in general. It takes some specialty design to make it all fit into such a small space. I like to tease people, anyone that wants to live in a tiny home long-term, truly doesn't have another choice, or it's almost a religion where they're trying to prove that how little space they need to live in a thing, because most bedrooms are bigger than 185 square feet now in a lot of the homes, so.
Some of us just.
But
That's true too, yeah.
Yeah, you're talking like square footage, where you're able to build up.
You can go up.
Again, often you can't because you still need a proper set of stairs. And once you add a proper set of stairs, you need a bigger footprint and then you go past that 400 square foot. That's kind of the magical, you're either a small house or you're a tiny house.
So what about spiral staircase?
What's that?
What about a spiral staircase?
Again, only allowed now for a 1-bedroom unit. And again, it takes up more space than you might think because it's almost 6 square feet all the way around. So
Got one question. If you get the basement rented out and you have bedrooms in it, do you have to have windows in it? And do they have to be a certain size, or you can do without windows?
again, you may be able to do it without windows because it might be a walkout basement. That's why I mean, each project is individual. In this case, say you had to come up a set of stairs to get out, to go out a door at the top, then yes, the bedrooms in that basement would have to have a certain size. And again, it depends how many bedrooms you have, but each bedroom would have to have.
Each bedroom has to have,
Correct.
okay, if you could own a lot of land, assume, right?
Yep.
Acreage, how many houses can you get on that land?
What's that question again?
So, well, we're probably talking about rural areas, not Prescott, so
Talking
yes.
outside of,
Yeah, typically one, plus an additional residential unit, in the rural areas generally.
It never required that you could have a second dwelling unit attached to your house, and also have a second dwelling separate, so you could do 3 in the rural areas.
Yeah, we, in Augusta, we can only do one, a detached or attached currently, so,
you can put more than one, what do you have to do?
you would need to apply for a rezoning, and we could look at adding, if you wanted to do two, but right now it's just one, attached or detached.
Okay, another question is, to separate the property, they're all separate as lots. And we're okay without rezoning?
If you sever the lot, yeah, I mean, we can have a look at severing a lot for you as well, and each lot would be permitted again, in Augusta, I go to the Augusta, a dwelling and a second dwelling unit, either attached or detached, but certainly if you're in Augusta, reach out to me, we can talk about possible severance for your lot and what kind of development potential is available.
How big of a lot?
How big of a lot?
Standard,
Well, it depends on the zoning, the designation, usually in the rural areas, again, in Augusta is 2 acres, for a residential lot.
so what happens to these tiny homes, when you put them in? You're telling me they gotta have 2 acres?
Right now in the rural areas, but if you're in the settlement areas, you need less, right now, but we are doing an official plan review, we're gonna be looking at lot sizes, so, but right now it's 2 acres in the country, 1 acre is in the settlement areas.
Well, what happens if you put up a granite suite, it's over 100 square feet, what the conditions on them?
On, doing a spring.
And what's the code, so you gotta follow by it, if you're allowed to build there.
Well, again, from the codes, it's a separate building and you're building it new, it sounds like, so it'd have to meet all the current codes. As for whether or not you'd be allowed it in Prescott. Again, as long as lot coverage didn't exceed the total amount. And I'm assuming it would be the same in both of you guys, if the granny suite is set, like, it's basically an ARU that's detached, so.
It has to be attached.
No, I said it would be detached.
Detached.
Okay, but it's very doable, and again, unless you have accessory structure maximum sizes, that would be what your maximum would be. I don't know if you have any minimum sizes. Never heard of a minimum for an accessory, so.
One of these small homes and that,
So very doable.
what kind of foundation you need?
Again, you need a proper foundation,
Slab.
but there's it could be a slab, it could be cement block, it could be poured concrete. It could even be, what's called a deformation resistant foundation. That's a fancy word of saying it's on blocks. Okay, but it's called deformation resistant, because it twists a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, so that increases the space for these tiny homes over the 170 square feet.
So, but that's just the minimum that's gotta be built in. You can build them bigger.
We're not saying you have to build.
No, we're not saying you have to build a tiny home or it has to be 185. What we're saying is if it's less than 185, it may have problems because The Ontario Building Code sets certain sizes for your bathroom, certain sizes for a bedroom. By the time you add it all up, equals 185 square feet for the minimum. But it does say you can build it smaller if you can show that it's integrated and designed that it doesn't need it. But for the most part, at 185 square feet, people are usually bigger than 185 square feet. That's what I'm saying.
What's the minimum frontage for Prescott?
Again, depends on the lot, but for R1, it's 50 feet for a single family. It's 55 feet for a duplex. It's 30 feet for a semi-detached. And I'm missing one, there's a D. I can't remember what the D is, but I can take a look. Basically, you need between a minimum of 30 feet if it's a semi-detached lot, to 60 feet if it's a duplex lot. And they fall all within that range.
You could share the water supplies then also.
No,
Yeah, that's separate water. supply.
you do when it's a semi-detached.
Yeah.
If it's a duplex, it can share the same, like it can come from one service, but it has to be brought into the house separately because you're not allowed to have someone else's plumbing in your house. So it comes onto the lot as one service and then it splits off just before it goes into the house.
Oh, your dad has a separate one.
That's right, but you gotta remember, in Prescott, we're all on services, so it's all sewer and water pipe, so it's nice that way. I know. Now, there is a difference in, I believe, two townships. One allows you to be on the same system or must be on the same system.
In Edwardsburg, Cardinal, you need to share water and sewer services.
Right.
Non-septic.
That's great. That's where I live.
Same, you need to be on the same septic. You can use a septic inspection from the conservation authority before you start, to make sure you've got the sort of capacity in there. It might be some upgrades are needed. But in Augusta, you can have it separate. It can be either or. You tie in the same systems or you can do a separate system as well. In Augusta, that's a requirement.
Just what's the difference if you're building a house, they have all these permits and everything. That's the same as if you're building a small house, you gotta have all the permits. and everything.
Nothing changes.
It's nothing different. Nope.
So where does Stoke Nation?
Sorry, somebody else had a good story. Sorry.
It's really bad.
We'll go back to you next. Yeah, there's.
Where do you find the requirements of the Grady well?
It's in the building code under part 8. I think it's section 2. It's a class 2.
Page number?
What was that again, sorry?
It's part 8.
Part 8 and section B.
Another thing too, people should realize is the number of people live in the house. Your septic tank's gotta accept so many people to adjust to that thing.
That's why they review it.
Get the size. Question about a holding tank. Can you put in holding tanks and get away with it? And pumped out the regular?
Under new construction, holding tanks aren't permitted as the primary use. Only time you can use a holding tank in an existing situation is the last alternative.
There's some details about South Nation. Like you said, you had to apply to them to find some information out, and if you have to get permits from you guys, what permit are you getting from South Nation? What?
It's not in Prescott, right? Because that's.
Well, in Woodsburg, Cardinal, and I would take us all the way
Yeah,
down. to
septic.
watershed.
For septic, both, Westford Cardinal and Augusta contract with South Nation to issue our septic permits.
Okay,
So you need to apply.
also, that's where the permits would.
That's what the permits for the septic, the building permit comes from our office, but the septic permit would come.
So would they research and do test holes to see where the surface water level is in the aquifer? Yeah, you just size up, or do you guys keep track of the depths of the wells in all the areas?
Well, wells are provincially regulated, yeah,
Okay.
Sean can speak to
Yeah,
that.
this is only septic, Tom, and they do come out and do test pits to see how well the soil's leaching and stuff like that.
Well, yeah, to see where,
Yep.
like where Prescott's all on rock. If it was septic there, then the people down below you are gonna get all your runoff and basements.
Yeah, it's the one plus to having the services. So, okay,
Specifically, like the others for Cardinal, you're talking about the shared systems, does that mean, like the gray water well isn't an option for separate units there, or does it have to be on the subject that the main dwelling is on, or can you do separate?
I'm not sure about gray water, but
Okay, the gray water system is only required if you're using a, chemical toilet. And that's because they don't want to inundate the toilet with, wash water.
Yeah, I was just thinking like for, like, so like that dwelling would have that separate system as opposed to on the main septic system of the primary property.
it would still need to be, say, I would be able to have two separate septic systems, it was up to connect to the same septic. So I think the option you remember was for a different kind of.
Well, the option when I brought that option forward, I was referring to an accessory dwelling in a rural setting.
But you could run a composting toilet and then have a gray water
That's correct.
well.
Yeah, for like a separate unit, not like a basement apartment or anything.
Oh, no, it wouldn't work there.
No, but on the same property.
Yes.
Oh, was there another one? Oh, sorry.
So if you access the funding and your tenant, qualifies initially, what's the process down the road if the tenant suddenly, gets a better job, is in a better financial, position? What happens then?
That's a great question. So the way it works for an affordable unit, income and assets are just tested at move-in. So if their financial situation improves, during that period of time, it's not something that's monitored, going forward.
How much of a loan can you have? Or percentage?
Yeah, so for the homeowner program, it's it on the site of your primary residence, it's up to $25,000, and the small landlord program is up to $50,000.
Would they be able to rent out like an Airbnb?
It has to be subject to the Residential Tenancies Act, so an Airbnb is.
It's okay?
No, so it's looking to create affordable housing, for the long term. Anyone else? Any more questions? You guys are more than welcome to grab us after the session's over. If you think of something or shy, that's no problem. I'd like to thank everybody for coming tonight, and listening to this in-on information session, and, feel free to follow up with any of us directly.